We don't necessarily have limitations per se, but like I definitely feel the idea that like when you're not mentally sharp, that you either don't do things you normally would, or you don't work in like the highest capacity. And so for me, a lot of times if I have like a really difficult situation and it's 4 or 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, I'm like, all right, you know what? That's going to be something I do tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. because like I'm not on point right now. And I'm going to like shelve that till tomorrow morning when I'm at my freshest and at my most like peak. And that's how I'm going to handle this situation. Because right now I'm either going to like be lazy or do something incorrect or do something that's now that I'm going to regret because I'm not at my peak. So we don't have anybody dictating that for us, like as far as like a governing body, but like I do agree that sometimes you're like, all right, this has to be done tomorrow. I'm doing more damage than good right now by trying to push through this and trying to work harder when I'm tired.
Oh yeah. I bet that's the difference in you paying attention to an and or an or.
Yeah. Or the capital P in property or not, you know. And I missed that one. Welcome back to our podcast, The Better You Are, The Better You Are. And we thought it'd be great and exciting today to do a series of discussions with different professionals about what they do and what their professions are. I know that when I was growing up, I had never seen a Black physician. I had never seen a female physician. So it never occurred to me to even think about being a physician until somebody, my dad, dropped that idea into my head simply by asking me, have you thought about being a doctor? So we're going to switch to Valencia now. And first of all, you began your career as a nurse in the intensive care unit and then transitioned to be a nurse anesthetist. First, what background and what did it take to be the nurse, to be a nurse in the ICU?
So in order to become a nurse, you graduate from a nursing program, whether that's an associate's program or a bachelor's level program. Once you complete your program, you take the national board exam or the NCLEX for nursing, and then you're able to enter the workforce. For me, I went from my nursing degree straight to the ICU. I was very attracted to the ICU just because I like challenges. I feel like you're challenged. It's a high stress level environment where you have to think quickly on your feet. There's lots of learning. You're continuously learning. And I just love the challenge of the ICU. So I chose to work in the ICU, and you definitely need the ICU experience in order to enter the nurse anesthesia realm, because all of your training, your skills, and patient scenarios that occur in the ICU help prepare you for an anesthesia program.
And what made you decide I want to do an anesthesia program?
Because I feel like anesthesia takes everything that I loved about the ICU just to the next level. I feel like the challenge there, the high acuity, the different medications that you have to administer, the thinking quickly on your feet, the critical thinking aspect, and obviously you're compensated more. Was kind of some of the reasoning behind me wanting to obtain an advanced practice degree in nursing.
And that takes a little more time. And as most things, when you specialize, it allows you, as Eric and even, Branden, it allows you to focus more on one area a little bit, true? And not broad area. The more I develop my niche, the more I can just focus on this, and the more I enjoy it. This is what I truly enjoy. I'm sure there were some things you didn't enjoy so much about being in the ICU that you no longer have to do as the nurse anesthetist.
That's correct.
And so tell me, what is your typical day as a nurse anesthetist like? What do you do now currently?
Okay, so CRNAs or nurse anesthetist, the term is used kind of interchangeably. They provide anesthesia for patients undergoing surgical procedures. They work in various settings. You can work in a hospital, surgery center, pain clinic. There's different areas that you can specialize in. There's pediatrics, there's obstetrics, working with labor and delivery, or just kind of general cases, which is my line of work.
So it's fair to say then that you going up another level and specializing broaden your ability to go across the country and work in different areas outside of, I got to find a hospital and work in the ICU.
Absolutely. I feel like there currently is an anesthesia shortage right now. I think there's a healthcare shortage in general. So there you can work in various settings. You have no problem finding a job. There's always recruiters, sending looking for new talent every day.
Do you work every day?
I don't. I work 2 12s and 2 8s currently, and then there's a call requirement. So I typically work one weekend call shift a month, or sometimes I do night call. So there's a lot of flexibility in the scheduling.
Now, I don't know if this is true in your training. I know, like in residence, as in pilots and other things, there are limits in the time that you can work in your profession doing either in the hospital or in a surgery unit um, per day or per the hours of the week. Do you have that time limit
It's
or?
a 24 hours
Okay.
technically. You can work in settings where you're obligated to be on call for 24 hours. Now, most of the time, there's a little bit of downtime, with cases and scheduling that you may not be working, the whole 24-hour period, but you are obligated to be available if needed for a 24-hour period.
And why, and I'll swing back and ask Brandon the same question. Why are there limits in how often or how long you
I
can
would
work? Why
say
can't you?
brain fatigue. In anesthesia, it's a very challenge. You're expected to be sharp, right? You have a patient's life in your hands, essentially, with each patient that you take care of. So if you're tired, you can, I think, exhaustion kind of increases the risk for a mistake to occur or something like that. So it's important that you're sharp and ready.
Yeah,
And Brandon, why are there
it's pretty
limits?
much the same for us. You just once you become tired, your decision making isn't very good. And they've done a lot of tests on it too, where you don't make good decisions, or you don't
Reaction
make
times.
as good. Yeah, your reaction time's low. You don't make as good decisions, and you tend to do quote unquote weird stuff when you're fatigued, and you're like, that's not what we're trained to do. Why are you doing that? And a lot of times it happens because you're tired, and you
And I
just
imagine Eric and Lauren would agree. In life in general, when you're tired, you're not rested enough, you're not eating well enough, you don't make good decisions. But there's certain professions that we're going to make sure that you get the time to be off and not rest so that you don't put other people at risk. And I'll be frank with you. Back in the day when I trained, there weren't limitations, and I'd be in the hospital for 3 days. And I came out one day, I couldn't remember where I parked my car. I had to walk around the whole parking garage just to find it.
Wow.
And
Yeah, I'll jump in
they're
quickly. We
yeah.
don't necessarily have limitations per se, but like I definitely feel the idea that like when you're not mentally sharp, that you either don't do things you normally would, or you don't work in like the highest capacity. And so for me, a lot of times, if I have like a really difficult situation and it's 4 or 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, I'm like, all right, you know what? That's going to be something I do tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. because like I'm not on point right now. And I'm going to like shelve that till tomorrow morning when I'm at my freshest and at my most like peak. And that's why I'm going to handle this situation. Because right now I'm either going to like be lazy or do something incorrect or do something that's now that I'm gonna regret because I'm not at my peak. So we don't have anybody dictating that for us, like as far as like a governing body, but like I do agree that sometimes you're like, all right, this has to be done tomorrow. I'm doing more damage than good right now by trying to push through this and trying to work harder when I'm tired.
oh yeah, I bet that's the
And
difference in you paying attention to an and or an or.
yeah,
Yeah.
or the capital P in property or not,
Yeah.
and I missed that one.
And then I
And
think sometimes in anesthesia too, even if you are tired, you just have to, because it's so vital, it's so critical, like you have someone's life in your hands and your license as well. You just
mhm.
have to you kind of learn to just kind of push through that fatigue and just like mentally focus for, the present time that's needed. So that's what
And
I
I'm
like.
sure. Oh, were you saying something else?
I was just saying I enjoyed that challenge too.
I know. That's what I love about you. You enjoy the challenge. You have a quiet strength about you that you do your job well, but you don't have to be boisterous about it, and that you can tell you love it. You enjoy it, and you do it. One of the things I wanted to say, it slipped my mind just now, is that, oh, and here's what I work with anesthesiologists. I didn't go through anesthesiology, but I remember when I was in residency, a friend of mine was considering it. And he talked to an anesthesiologist who said, well, 95% of the time, it's pretty routine and going as you expect it to. Maybe a little glitch, but not bad. But 5% of the time, it can be a critical mess. And so that's when you want to be sharp and I say, oh man, I'm sort of tired now. And to have that background, that skill, that plan B of what we're going to do when suddenly we didn't expect any of this to happen and now it's happening. So is that fair to say for you
That
that
is
there's
very
important?
true. Very well known saying in anesthesia, 90% of the time boring or, status quo, and then 10% of the time it's really critical. And I think those 10% of the time, 5% of the time, those moments are really what matters and kind of make a difference in the patient outcomes. And that's kind of the challenge that you encounter with anesthesia. One of the reasons why I like it, because it's, can be challenging at times, and the amount of responsibility, the pressure, in order to be able to get through that, it's very rewarding at the end of the day. So.
And you, just like these other people, work with a team. I mean, you're putting somebody to sleep, you're waking up, but you got to know what the procedure is. How long do they anticipate the procedure is going to go? Talk about your
Yeah, so a
collaboration
typical
with your.
day for me, we get to, clock in, you get to work, you look at the operating room control board, or you look at the caseload for the day, you look at the cases you're assigned to, you look at your patient, you're able to, everything's electronic now, so you can look up your patient, look up the type of case, you can look up the patient's comorbidities or health conditions. And so you see your caseload, you're kind of anticipating, oh, I may need this, or you're developing different plans or steps in your head in order to have a successful day, or what extra medications you may need, or what type of like additional monitoring might be required based upon the procedure type and the patient and their health conditions.
And I imagine that your procedures are different from one patient to the next. It's not like we're
Yeah, and
doing
I
C
think that's
sections
why I
all
like
day. Yeah,
anesthesia too, because there's so
yeah.
many different types of cases that you can do, and so there's always a little bit of a challenge and a lot of variety, which is kind of what I appreciate. I wouldn't want to specialize in one thing where I'm just doing the same thing every day. That would just kind of be a bit mundane to me. So that's one of the um, things that I appreciate about my job as well.
What are some things that maybe you don't especially like, or a thing that, when I decided to go into this profession, I knew it's going to be this. I know I'm going to have my critical moments. I know it's going to work my mind. I know I'm going to be interacting with patients and different professionals, and I enjoy that collaboration. I didn't expect this though, and that's sort of not one of my favorite things.
I think in anesthesia, there's not a whole lot of flexibility in terms of the schedule.
Mm.
And I think in healthcare in general, you kind of notice it more around like the holiday seasons where other people, it's Christmas
Ah.
week, they're off all week, and with healthcare, it doesn't shut down. Surgeries are still going on. So I think that's what makes it kind of challenging, if you will. Your schedule is kind of you're at the will of the hospital. So I think that can be challenging at times. We have to, for instance, we have to put our vacation schedule in a whole year in advance. So it's really hard
Yeah.
plan, what I'm doing next year. And then when things come up, you don't really have that flexibility to, oh, can you just cover for me? It's a little more complex with that. So I think the scheduling aspect will be one of the kind of downsides to my job, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And who would have thought I can't tell you what I'm doing next Christmas because my
Right.
job sort of keeps me from it. So that I can understand that.
And then I
Um,
think working with, you run into different personalities and um, you might work with some difficult people during the day. But I think how to kind of overcome that is putting the patient first and um, saying everyone's common goal is to provide, good care for the patient, have a good patient outcome. So if you can kind of redirect the
right.
the priority to be on the patient, then sometimes that helps navigate challenging
Keeping the main thing the main thing. Here's what I am. I'm here to help this patient. We all are in this room to help this patient. It's not about
yeah.
your ego or why or and having been on the other side of surgery with anesthesia and the patients starting to wake up or before you're quite ready or feeling the pain and we have to delay the surgery, but to realize there's a lot of factors that go into that and that different people are trying to keep there's somebody else just trying to keep the schedule on time.
Yeah.
But you know what, we got into something we didn't expect
Yeah.
now because the surgeon has more than he anticipated. The anesthesiologist or the nurse anesthetist has to react to like, no, I need my anesthesia to go longer. I didn't anticipate that, but I switch to my plan B and go through that. And I imagine very similar to Brandon's profession, you have a checklist of
Yeah.
things that you have. Talk about that and why the small things are important on those. Not
So
specific.
most of the time we utilize an anesthesia machine if a patient's going to be on a ventilator. So there are certain things that on the anesthesia machine that you want to make sure check out in order to perform surgery. Also you want to make sure you have like medical emergency medical equipment available. Suction, different types of without getting too medical. too
Sure. Yeah.
different types of backup airways available. So you're kind of always, for each case, each patient, you're thinking, this is plan A, this is the plan that I am anticipating. But if this doesn't work out, then I have this available, or we're going to do A, B, or C. So I think you definitely have to have a couple plans in the back of your head with each case.
And to that point, it's the small things that can burn you a little bit. And if you have a checklist, you make sure you go through each of them. I remember specifically a case when I was a resident that we were going to do surgery on this patient who was very large and obese, and that you give medicines to sedate them, and then you get ready to intubate them. And this anesthesiologist couldn't intubate this patient, but she had already stopped her ability to breathe on her own.
Yeah.
And they're calling in a lot of people to help. She calls this whatever code. They're coming in, and I was attending. He's like, she's not breathing. He was getting ready to do a tracheostomy
Yeah.
when the third anesthesiologist who came into the room looked over and flipped the switch for the ventilator to go on because they had simply forgotten to turn it on. And so it's those little things in the checklist that
Yeah.
keep you from those critical things where you think, well, she's doing this, she's doing that. The
Yeah.
simple matter was we didn't go through our checklist and do that.
Yeah, and anytime you have a problem with the patient breathing or the ventilator, you always want to just kind of retrace your steps and, make sure that everything's on, make sure that everything's connected. Because there have been moments where, the circuit for the breathing circuit has become disconnected, and you just kind of have to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
through that checklist. And
You want to stay calm
you have
and
to
go
stay
through.
calm. Anesthesia has to maintain their calm because they kind of set the tone for everyone in the operating room. So if
Amen.
you're calm, then everything, everyone else is calm. And I like that challenge too.
I'm sure, and that's where your demeanor comes in so well with that. I'm sure you're excellent at it.
Thank you for listening in today. Weren't you inspired, encouraged, and uplifted? We hope so, because we're praying the best for you. Join us again next time for more betterment, because the better you are, the better you are.